Okay, the next step is let's move your mouse over the scene constructor here. And notice this mentions the width and height. So if you run this example, notice that this has a certain width and height here. So let's just close it just to play around with that. Let's make that 350 so we know where that came from. Let's save it. Let's run it again. And that should be slightly bigger. I'm not sure if you noticed that. So one of the things I want to do is let's refactor some of the code. So for example, I don't like this name. So I'm going to right click here and rename this as the driver example. Driver. So that way I know this is the driver. This is what makes it run. This will actually just make changes in several places. If that name existed in several places, you can say finish. Let's run it just to make sure nothing's broken. And it works the same way. So same thing here. I don't like this name right here. So let's right click here. And let's rename that also. And I'm going to say here, tax search form. Let's click on OK there. Let's run it just to see what happens. And if I double click here, just to see this in full screen mode, notice I'm getting an error here. And of course the error is because it can't find that code that we were looking for. So in the past it had a certain name and then we changed the name. So that's why this is complaining. So if you notice here it says it's getting a null pointer exception here because the location can't be found. So if I double click here, the only thing I need to do is just rename this accordingly. That's what's loading this particular file. So if we change that to tax search form, that should actually solve the problem. So there it goes working again. Now the next thing I want to do is let's change this also to, if I right click here and say refactor, rename, let's change this to tax search controller. Let's click on here and finish. Let's run this again to see what happens. And it looks like that's working fine. Okay, so let's go back to the Fxml file here. And it looks like everything is fine here also. Note, I'm currently in a tax search form Fxml. Notice that this Fxml example, this is the name of the class that represents the controller. So this is our controller here that I'm clicking on in Package Explorer. This is how this file knows about the tax controller. All right, next thing here, I don't want this to be a password attribute because eventually I want to actually display some text here. So for example, if I run this and if I try to type anything here, it's in password mode. So let's close that. I don't want that to be in password mode. I actually want that to be a text field. So I'm going to grab this text right here and let's go where it says password field. And what I'm going to do here is let's make this column index 1 and this column 2. Let's get rid of this particular one right here, and we'll keep that text empty. This ID, we'll call it tax description. Say tax detail. Okay. Now let's run this again just to make sure it looks okay. So this information now is missing. Now this is a text, and this will have information once we plug it in, but doesn't have any information there yet. So what we're going to do is go back to our controller. Let's add this information. If you remember, it was a text. Let's double check on the data type. It's a text. So I'll make it a text, and then I'll put that right here. Now this is what I want to happen here, is every time I click on that button in the tax detail section, it'll just show what we clicked on something and some detail information about the taxes. So for now, let's type in text detail. Instead of getting, I want to set text. Now what do I want to set it to? I want to set it to whatever they typed in the tax search. So I'll go here and say tax search, and I want to get the text that came from tax search. Save it. Let's run it. And let's type in New York. Let's click on search, and something it doesn't like. So let's double click here and see what happened. It's telling me a null pointer on line 48. I'll click here and go to line 48. It doesn't like this tax detail. So did I spell something wrong? Let's click on save. Let's go back to the form. Okay, it says tax detail here. I think everything is fine on this side. Okay, after looking at this code, I just realized I made a couple of mistakes. So if I click back on line 48, what this means is there's a problem with the ID. So if I go back to the form, notice here on, let's see, tax detail, I forgot the FX portion. I'm thinking in HTML where we use the ID tag. And also think I made a slight mistake here on the row index, but let me just see. I'll put here the word not applicable for now. Let's just see if that shows up. If I run that code, okay, notice that it's not showing up. I think because this is supposed to be on row 2. So notice that this is row 1 and this is row 2. So this should be row 2. If we save it now and run it, let's hope for the best. Oh, I have multiple versions up. So let me, okay, and Y, click on search. Okay, that looks like it's doing something, but I think that's an old version that I'm running. So let's close all these versions. I'll click here. Let's stop that one. Stop that one. Stop that one until there's no more red boxes because I had so many of them instantiated working in memory. So let's go back to now this one right here. In fact, when I type in the text, this will get New York. And then I'll just add some text so we can see a little, something different. And I'll type in the word description. Let's run it again. Okay, it says not applicable, which is good. Let's type in New York description, and tax information. So again, we made this a text, so it could be only read-only, so they can't touch this information here. And let's type in here CT for Connecticut. Now, the goal of this eventually is to type in the code. If the code exists on the database, we will grab the CT description, which would be Connecticut, the taxes that they're paid, and so on. All right, that's it for this example. With good code, you can accomplish anything. All right, good luck in playing around with this example.